Good evening. I'm so glad you're here. I'm so glad you're here. Those were the last words I heard my father say. I've thought a lot about those words since he passed. Although it was only 5 words, those 5 words said a lot. It meant, in part, he was so happy to see me. He also meant, I'm relieved, as I know you'll be with me, as I move from my earthly home to my heavenly home. In part, it meant how important I am to him. He knew that when I arrived, I would make sure that everything was going to be okay. And it absolutely meant, I love you. I knew his passing would come. I've thought about it for many years. I was always aware that my dad was 40 when I was born. He was 64 when I graduated from college. I was aware, as many of you here today know, that Dad was a smoker and a drinker into his 50s, and those vices could play a part in shortening his life. Thank goodness I was wrong about that. For the past 25 years, I would frequently tell my wife how important it was that I spend time with my dad, because I always feared I wouldn't have him long enough. How incredibly fortunate all of us are to have had Ed Glancy live as long as he did. Tomorrow is Dad's 95th birthday. Tonight we will celebrate his amazing life. We will share some of his stories, some of our stories, and some of his passions. Thank you for being here to celebrate the life of our amazing dad. I'm so glad you're here. Edward Fulton Glancy was born March 26, 1927, to Edward Martin and Elizabeth Rose Glancy in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. He was the younger brother to Mary and Joan, and an older brother to Anne, Joe, and Jim, and raised in Johnstown, Pennsylvania. Known as Bud to his parents, Dad to his children, Granddad to his grandchildren, Eddie Glancy the Fancy Dancer by Gene Kelly and many of his dance partners, Eddie G and Fast Eddie to his friends. Each of us gathered here this evening can thank our Heavenly Father for using Ed Glancy to make our world a better place and our lives more fulfilled. Dad was fond about talking about GPS, which of course is God's positioning system. He would say that all of us have benefited from GPS, none more so than me. Dad was blessed to have more friends and more family that loved him than anyone else I know. To his many friends gathered here tonight, and the many that have passed on before him, thank you. You made him feel like the most popular man in town. Perhaps the unofficial mayor of Fort Lauderdale. He credited God's positioning system for placing each of you in his life. And he was genuinely thankful for the kindness and friendship you generously shared with him. You made him feel important, special, and loved. This first part's going to be slow, guys.
You're doing great, Mike.
You shared meals with him. You laughed with him. You shared your struggles and your triumphs. You prayed with him. You gave him the gift of true friendship. Dad's life was a symphony of love, faith, adventure, curiosity, sacrifice, kindness, humor, high ideals, dance, music, and poetry. This evening we will attempt to weave this great symphony into his story for all of us to celebrate and enjoy. Kara, Jenny, and Joe, if you'll come up and help me. Early on, we learned a poem called Laska. It's very meaningful to all of us, and we want to share it with you. I want free life, and I want fresh air, and I sigh for the canter after the cattle, and the cracks of whips like shots in a battle, and the medley of horns and hoofs and heads that wars and wrangles and scatters and spreads, and the green beneath and the blue above, and dash and danger and life and love. And Laska.
Alaska used to ride a masquerade Mustang close by my side, with blue serape and bright-billed spur. I laughed with joy as I looked at her. Little knew she of books or creeds, and Ave Maria sufficed her needs. Little she cared, save to be by my side, to ride with me and ever to ride, from Sansaba's shore to Lavaca's tide. She was as bold as the billows that beat, as wild as the breezes that blow. From her little head to her little feet, she swayed in her suppleness to and fro. With each gust of passion, a sapling pine that grows on the edge of a Kansas bluff and wars with the wind, but the weather is rough, is like this Laska, this love of mine. She would hunger that I might eat, take the bitter, and leave me the sweet. But once, when I made her jealous for fun, by something I'd looked at, or seen or done, one Sunday in San Antonio to a glorious girl of the Alamo, she drew from her garter a dear little dagger, and the sting of a wasp, it made me stagger. An inch to the left, or an inch to the right, and I shouldn't be maundering here tonight. But she sobbed, and sobbing, so swiftly bound the torn rebozo about my wound that I quite forgave her. Scratches don't count in Texas down by the Rio Grande.
Her eye was brown, a deep, deep brown. Her hair was darker than her eye, and something in her smile and frown, curled crimson lip and instep high, showed that there ran in each blue vein, mixed with the milder Aztec strain, the vigorous vintage of old Spain. She was alive in every limb, with feeling to the fingertips. And when the sun is like a fire, and sky one shining, soft sapphire, one does not drink in little sips.
The air was heavy, and the night was hot. I sat by her side and forgot the herd that were taking their rest. forgot the air was close and pressed, that the Texas northern comes sudden and soon, in the dead of night or the blaze of noon, that once let the herd at its breath take fright, nothing on earth could stop its flight, and woe to the rider, and woe to the steed who falls in front of their mad stampede.
Was that thunder? I grasped the cord of my swift Mustang without a word. I sprung to the saddle and she clung behind, away on a hot chase down the line. And never was fox hunt half so hard, and never was steed so well spared. For we rode for our lives. We shall hear how we fared in Texas, down by the Rio Grande.
The Mustang flew. And we urged him on. There was one chance left, and you have but one. Halt, jump to the ground, shoot your horse, crouch under his carcass, and take your chance. And if the steers in their frantic course don't batter you both to pieces at once, you may thank your star. But if not, goodbye to the quickening kiss, and the long-drawn sigh, and the open air, and the open sky in Texas, down by the Rio Grande.
The cattle gained on us, and just as I fell, for my old six-shooter behind in my belt, down came the Mustang, and down came we, clinging together. And what was the rest? A body that spread itself on my breast, two arms that shielded my dizzy head, two lips that hard on my lips were pressed. Then came the thunder in my ears, as over us surged the sea of steers, blows that beat blood into my eyes, and when I could rise, Alaska was dead.
I gouged out a grave a few feet deep, and there in her arms I laid her to sleep. And there she's lying, and no one knows. The summer shines and the winter snows. For many a day the flowers have spread a pall of petals over her head. Little gray hawk hangs aloft in the air. Sly coyote trots here and there. A black snake glides and glitters and slides into a rift in a cottonwood tree. The buzzard sails on, comes and is gone, stately and still like a ship at sea. I wonder why I do not care for the things that are. Like the things that were, and as after my heart lie buried there in Texas, down by the Rio Grande. There you go. That was good. I think we all cried about that. Cara, Jane, Joe, and I, in the last few days, and dash and danger and life and love. We open with the poem Alaska because the key elements of the poem remind us so much of Dad. Alaska is a story of adventure, love, and sacrifice. Dad's life is full of adventure, love, and sacrifice. From the hills of the Allegheny Mountains to the Taj Mahal, Dad's been just about everywhere. As a 13-year-old Boy Scout, he went with a Boy Scout troop to the World's Fair in New York City in 1940. He told me he joined the Boy Scouts for the sole reason that it was going to the World's Fair in 1940. He claimed that once he arrived in New York City, he ditched the Boy Scouts and explored the city on his own for several days. And if anyone else told me that story, I don't think I'd believe it. But knowing Dad, I suspect it was mostly true. His adventure continued as a 17-year-old high school senior, choosing to trade in the second half of his senior year of high school to serve his country during World War II in the United States Navy. Since Dad was a fantastic athlete, he was the quarterback and middle linebacker on the football team and point guard on the basketball team that played for the Pennsylvania State Championship. Because of that, the Navy chose to assign him to a special unit of Navy frogmen known as Lion 9. He was assigned to special training to learn how to disarm coastal munitions in the hours prior to the invasion of Japan. This involved him swimming from the ship to the shore in the middle of the night with a few simple tools to make it safer for the Marines when they would storm the beaches a few hours later. Hey Joe, can you bring me some tissue?
Got allergies?
Yes, allergies, terrible. Woo! Fortunately, the Japanese surrendered prior to the invasion of the mainland. Dad arrived at the Yokosuka Naval Base shortly after the surrender. He spent nearly a year in Japan as part of the occupational force. During that time, he was assigned to clear hidden weapons from the caves along the coast and later to work in a carpentry shop, building windows to replace all those that had been blown out during the bombing of Japan. He also figured out a way to purchase candy bars and cigarettes from the Navy and then sell them on the black market for a healthy profit. He used those profits when he returned home to pay for, or pay in part, for one sister's wedding and to help another sister pay for her surgery. When the war was over, his mom convinced him to attend St. Francis University. Though academics had rarely inspired him, he earned his degree in economics in 1950. He spent the next 6 years as a salesman traveling the Midwest and Atlantic states. He claims to have been just about everywhere, in every town, hotel, restaurant, and bar along the way. For the nearly 55 years I was blessed to be in his presence, every time he would meet someone new, he would ask them where they were from. And invariably he would say, "Sure, I know it well. I stayed in the XYZ hotel or ate in that restaurant." But always remembering the details of his stay and often the people he met along the way. And I used to think he was full of it. Except for his stories never changed, and you just can't lie for that many years in a row. Extraordinary. His memory was so out of the ordinary, which explains how he seemed to effortlessly commit to memory so much of what you'll be hearing this evening. After 6 long years on the road, Dad knew he needed something different, so he decided to become a Catholic priest. He made plans to join a seminary in Chicago in January of 1957. Fortunately for me and for all of us here, he had a last-second change of heart. And he traded in his Greyhound bus ticket to Chicago for a one-way to Jacksonville, Florida. Late that night, as the bus pulled into Jacksonville, Dad decided he needed to go to the end of the line in Miami. Arriving in Miami with little money, he quickly found a job as a metal salesman for J.M. Toll. In a matter of days, they sent him to Atlanta, Georgia for several months for extensive training to learn everything he needed to know about metallurgy. Which, by the way, he continued to know that for the rest of his life and would pretty consistently tell me about the characteristics of all different kinds of metals, even into his mid-90s. Once the training was completed, his supervisor told him that he would begin his career in Birmingham, Alabama. Dad thanked the gentleman for all the training and wished him luck, then told him he would be going back to Miami. The supervisor objected, telling him the company wasn't ready yet to open the Miami market. And Dad told him that was not his problem. The supervisor relented and told Dad he would go back to Miami and wait for instruction. In the meantime, Dad would get his salary and a company car while he waited. He ended up waiting nearly 2 years. If you're following that, he got paid for doing nothing for 2 years in Miami and his 30-year-old self. That's a good gig. Way to go, Dad. Dad loved fishing in Miami, going out to the nightclubs, fishing for sailfish aboard the Candy Kid, and spending weekends dancing with beautiful women in Havana, Cuba. During the summer of 1961, his brother Jim called and told him that his wife Kathy had friends, Jean and Mary Lane, coming down for a beach vacation. Jim asked him if he would show the girls around Fort Lauderdale. After showing the girls around a bit, Dad took Mary Lane to the Mai Kai for dinner and drinks. Realizing they were both Irish Catholic and wanting a lot of the same things in life, Dad said it would be a good idea if they got married. Mary Lane said okay, but she'd have to tell her parents first. A few months later, on December 2nd, 1961, they were married in Niagara Falls, New York, and that's how our family began. Raising a family became his next great adventure, and I don't believe that anyone could have enjoyed the adventures of being a father more than our dad. He would happily tell you that was his favorite adventure. As Dad progressed through the 12 steps of AA, he was given an assignment to start something and see it through to the end. Harkening back to his youth in the 1930s when he learned to dance from the legendary Gene Kelly, who called him Eddie Glancy, the fancy dancer, Dad enrolled to be a dance instructor with Arthur Murray and dedicated himself to be a great dancer and instructor. Dad loved to dance, and this made him very popular with the ladies. I'm sure his good looks and charm made him all that more popular. At the age of 65, he was hired to be a gentleman host aboard many of the finest cruise ships in the world. He spent the next 10 years sailing the 7 seas, visiting nearly all the great ports in the world and dancing the night away with ladies in beautiful dresses. After 10 years, he decided it was time to jump ship and spend more time with his growing number of grandchildren. He traveled often to Minnesota, California, Georgia, and North Carolina during the next 15 years, enjoying life as a granddad. You'll hear more about his life of adventure, sacrifice, and love as we celebrate this evening. Okay, Laska was the longest poem you guys are going to hear tonight. I don't think it was the longest poem he knew, but it was the longest one you're going to hear. So from the longest poem ever taught to us to the shortest, Fleas, Adam had 'em. Ladies and gentlemen, that was one of the first poems I learned, and is also one of the shortest poem you'll hear tonight. Dad loved to tell this poem because he could teach it to anybody, and it always brought out that great smile of his. So if you've never memorized a poem before, please learn this easy one from our dad. Fleas, Adam had 'em.
Another treasure, a bag of tools. Isn't it strange that princes and kings, and clowns that caper in sawdust rings, and common people like you and me are builders for eternity? Each is given a bag of tools, a shapeless mass, a book of rules, and each must make, ere life is flown, a stumbling block or a stepping stone.
Each time I read, recite, or hear a bag of tools, I can't help but think about all the stepping stones our dad placed along our path. First and foremost, he helped us build our paths with love, kindness, patience, and encouragement, and acceptance. Mom and Dad generously provided all of us with the opportunity to attend college without incurring debt, supporting us even when our effort didn't warrant the support. I remember all too well getting academically suspended from Santa Fe Community College. That's a 2-year college, and they suspended me after 4 years. I felt like such a failure. But Mom and Dad never gave up on me, only increased their encouragement and taught me what it means to be patient. With their support, I finally got my act together and achieved what they always knew I could. When it was time to buy a house, Dad was there to help each of us with our down payment and much needed appliances, fridges and washers, dryers, everything. What a head start he gave. When I wanted to open my own insurance agency, he was quick to lend me the money I needed to start, telling me I could pay it back when I could and without interest. When I was presented with a great opportunity to grow my business through acquisition, he told me to do whatever I needed to do, and he would lend me $50,000, interest-free, to make it happen. But it wasn't just about me or just about his children. I've witnessed Dad help others with stepping stones all my life. I'm proud of him. Being such a great dad. He was such a great example. Many of you here today can attest to his willingness to help others. Whatever you needed, he was willing to share. Whether it was words of encouragement, an engaged and interested confidant, financial help, or even tough love, Dad was always willing to give. A friend recently told me, this week, he told me of a story of Dad crumpling up dollar bills and throwing them into the bushes near the IHOP on Federal Highway. "Eddie, what are you doing?" he asked. And Dad told him he knew the homeless would eventually find them, and perhaps they would get a meal or a fresh cup of coffee out of it. I've seen Give Dad to the homeless countless times, but I think he liked the anonymity of leaving money for the less fortunate to find, knowing there's something about finding treasure that must feel better than asking for handouts. Soon after Dad became sober, he purposefully asked himself an extremely important question every single day. And he wrote down his answer to that question every single day for decades, so that he was accountable to what was important to him. That question was, what did I do for someone else today? Because of Dad, many of you here ask yourself that question every single day. And because of that question, and his willingness and encouragement to share with others, there are untold acts of kindness and service spreading out in every direction from this community. Wouldn't it be amazing if all of us asked ourselves at the end of each day, what did I do for someone else today? If you wish to honor Dad's memory, I can't think of a better way than to ask yourself each evening, what did I do for someone else today? Connor?
The true gentleman. The true gentleman is the man whose conduct proceeds from goodwill and an acute sense of propriety, and whose self-control is equal to all emergencies, who does not make the poor man conscious of any poverty, the obscure man of any obscurity, or any man of his inferiority or deformity, who is himself humbled if necessity compels him to humble another, who does not flatter wealth, cringe before power, or boast of his own possessions or achievements, who speaks with frankness but always with sincerity and sympathy, whose deed follows his word, who thinks of his own rights and feelings of others rather than his own, and who appears well in any company, a man with whom honor is sacred and virtue safe.
Thank you, Connor. No, that's it.
Okay.
That's it.
Growing up isn't easy, but the two best teachers I've ever had on becoming a man have been my father and his father. I miss my granddad a lot.
I love you too. Be careful. Dad found this passage in a book I left on the kitchen table while home from college. It was something I was trying to memorize, and naturally he memorized it before I did. He used to tell me about addressing his friends in the men's independence group as true gentlemen. He wanted to know that they should behave and conduct themselves at all times like the true gentlemen he knew they were. Dad lived his life as a true gentleman. Get close, because it's hard to.
Can you hear me?
Now you get close. Speak up.
Hi, I'm Laura Glancy. I'm Mike's wife, obviously. I'm going to read an Irish funeral prayer. Death is nothing at all. I have only slipped away to the next room. The old life that we lived so fondly is untouched, unchanged. I am I, and you are you. Whatever we were to each other, that we are still. Call me by my old familiar name. Speak to me in the easy way, which you always used. Put no sorrow in your tone. Wear no forced air of solemnity or sorrow. Laugh as we always laughed, at the little jokes we enjoyed together. Play, smile, think of me, pray for me. Let my name be ever the household word that it always was. Let it be spoken without effort, without the trace of a shadow on it. Life means all that it ever meant. It is the same that it ever was. There is absolute, unbroken continuity. Why should I be out of mind? Because I am out of sight? I am but waiting for you, for an interval, somewhere, very near, just around the corner. All is well, nothing is hurt, nothing is lost. One brief moment, and all will be as it was before, only better, infinitely happier. How we shall laugh at the trouble of parting when we meet again. I think a lot of you know that Mike talked to his dad a lot. Very, very frequently. And there was one word that always came up every time he talked, and it was the word wonderful. Everything we did was wonderful. He just used it a lot. That's how Ed approached life. And it's my favorite word for him because he was wonderful. He was a wonderful father.
a wonderful grandfather. He was my father-in-law, but he was really my father. And he was a great guy.
Yes. On August 9th, 2009, Dad wrote to me the following: I hope you will use the Irish funeral prayer someday, way in the future, for your old man. It really says what most of us believe. Dad used to tell me that just because a ship had sailed over the horizon and we're limited by our sight to see it, it doesn't mean the ship is gone. It's just beyond our current limitations. And so it is that Ed Glancy is not gone. He's just only beyond the horizon. Someday, hopefully way in the future, we will shed our aging and imperfect vessels and be reunited with our loved ones over the horizon. It is this belief which brings me hope. It makes it possible to bear the heartache of not being able to hold his hands, hear his voice, draw from his wisdom, or look into his beautiful blue eyes. I will be with him again. He is waiting for me, just over the horizon. This prayer reminds me of another prayer that he shared with me often. God, give me the wisdom to discern just where I am needed, and grant nobody's cry for help to me shall go unheeded. Let me see into the hearts who hide their deepest pain and show me how to say the words to bring them hope again. Lord, you have given me so much, and now I want to share the love with which you shower me with people everywhere. And though I bring nothing into the world, and that is how I'll leave it, may all my acts ring out with faith the way that I believe it. Charlie, I think you're up.
Hey everybody. This is one of countless things I've heard for many times that he could just recall and just go right through without even thinking twice. It's called attitude.
I think they can't hear you in the back.
They cannot?
They can't. You gotta get closer.
How about now? The longer I live, the more I realize the impact of attitude on life. Attitude to me is more important than facts. It is more important than the past, than education, than money, than circumstances, than failures and successes, than what other people think, say, or do. It is more important than appearance, giftedness, or skill. It will make or break a company, a church, a home. The remarkable thing is we have a choice every day regarding the attitude we will embrace for that day. We cannot change the inevitable. The only thing we can do is play on the one string we have, and that is our attitude. I'm convinced that life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. And so it is with you. We are in charge of our attitudes. I asked Mike if I could say a word, and I thought about this ever since Eddie died. And I was, anticipating having a moment. And I realized that all of us in this room could stand up here for an hour and still never do him justice. It would be impossible. So I thought, what's the one thing? One time he actually said, I think you're one of my closest friends. What an honor. I admired him so much. For him to say that, it was just incredible. But the one thing that he was consistent about was the generosity of his spirit. He would treat the homeless guy, as you mentioned, or a president with the same respect. He never talked down to anybody. At least I never saw it, I never heard it. He never talked in a bad way about anybody. If he spoke about you, whatever it was, it would always be the one thing that he thought was your best achievement or your best characteristic, and that's how he would describe you. Never any negatives at all. And the one word he always used when describing somebody was wonderful. So, thanks.
Thank you, Charlie. Jenny Leggett. Please speak close to the microphone.
My remarkable, beautiful family. My remarkable, beautiful, loving family. They are my accompaniment to every breath I take. They make my life a symphony of love. To the arranger, conductor, creator of the universe, I prostrate myself in gratitude. My head rests on my pillow. I turn off the lamp behind my bed, close my eyes, and try not to smile.
Dad is famous for taking notes. He would hear something, see something, think of something, and he'd scribble it down so that he could reference it again. Then he would stuff these notes into his shirt pocket or into the book he was reading. I searched the internet for the words penned on this note that I had found. It doesn't seem to exist, which leads me to believe this amazing, beautiful love letter to his family was his original thought, which comes as no surprise. He loved and cherished his family as much as any man. His character, his love, and his dedication to family was an example that shaped the character and love of family of his four children. His four children share. I see it alive and thriving in Kara, Jenny, and Joe, and I am beyond proud to be cut from the same cloth as my siblings. Tom Pfister, you are up. Make sure you speak close.
Hi, I'm Tom Pfister. I'm Ed's son-in-law, Kara's husband. And I took Ed flying about 2002. We went from Minneapolis to Brainerd, and it was a nice sunny day. And Ed was very brave on that flight, I thought. And every time that Ed would call the house, the first thing he would ask me was, he'd say, "Tom, how you doing? Have you been flying lately?" So he knew. And Ed really liked the flying and had an affinity for aviation. I think he jumped out of an airplane just, about 3 years ago?
Yes, recently.
So I'm going to recite High Flight. Oh, I have slipped the surly bonds of earth and danced the skies on laughter's silvered wings. Sunward I've climbed and joined the tumbling mirth of sun-slit clouds, and done 100 things you have not dreamed of. Wheeled and soared and swung high in the sunlit silence. Hovering there, I've chased the shouting wind along and flung the craft through footless halls of air. Up, up the long, delirious, burning blue, I've topped the windswept height with easy grace, where never lark or ever eagle flew, and while with silent lifting mind I've trod the high, suppressed sanctity of space, put out my hand and touch the face of God.
Well said. Dad loved high flight. I'm sure flying appealed to his adventurous ways.
Mike, is it possible that I say a word?
Yeah, come on.
So, hello. For everybody that doesn't know me, my name is Patrick Sherray. Uncle Ed was my great uncle, sister, or brother of my grandmother, Mary Glancy. And my family has traveled down here to, meet all of you wonderful people. And I didn't plan on coming up and speaking, but seeing the crowd, I felt compelled to come up and say a few words and share a little bit of my experience with Uncle Ed. So I'm 38 years old, so I knew him for 38 years.
GPS signal lost.
And I am an alcoholic. I first went to prison 13 years ago. And I didn't want my mother to come and see me.
Come on. I know just how you feel.
But I want to share this story with you guys. I don't want my mother to come and see me. Uncle Ed came and visited me in jail. First time I went to jail. And may I say now, well, I am married. I made 6 figures last year. I'm happy. I have a go child. Life is good. Life is good. So, you know, and when he told me in that state was, Pat, you're not a failure. You're down right now, but you're not out. And I'll never forget it. Him, Uncle Bob, we're talking through a telephone through glass while I'm in prison garb. And I'll never, ever, ever, ever forget the encouragement that your dad gave me at that point. And me and your dad and Uncle Ed, we continue to have a fantastic relationship. And he went to the grave, unfortunately, with me owing him money. Like, he loaned me, like, I'm sure maybe some other people in this room, possibly. I don't know. He was very generous, but his words of encouragement and his spirit of optimism and letting me know that I was down, but I wasn't out. And I never, ever forgot that. And I just want to share that with this room.
Thank you. And that's God at work, using Dad for sure, and using Patrick. Dad loved this poem, High Flight. I'm sure flying appealed to his adventurous ways. But when he got engaged to my mom, her only condition was that he never become a pilot, because her father had been a pilot. Once he made that promise is when he made it his mission to get it out of his system before the wedding. He immediately signed up for flying lessons at North Perry Airport. He loved the feeling of flying, practicing takeoffs and landings, climbing to a stall and then regaining control as the plane dove. On October 12, 1962, less than 2 months from his wedding, he completed his first solo flight. He continued to fly for the next 6 weeks, hoping to get the thrill of flying out of his system before the wedding. He was true to his word and never flew a plane again while he was married. However, sometime in his 60s, he was asked if he would like to ride on the Goodyear blimp, and he eagerly accepted. Once airborne and above Fort Lauderdale, the pilot asked him if he'd like to take over controls. Dad was thrilled and said yes, although he wished it would go fast. Dad often looked at the skies and pointed to the birds and exclaimed that they were just showing off. He loved flight, free of the bonds that hold our bodies to the ground. His soul took flight not so long ago. I'm sure he's doing loop-de-loops, steep climbs and sharp descents in heaven now. And of course, he hovers above us, keeping a close eye on all those he loves. Peyton.
Yes, sir. Hi, I'm Peyton.
Closer.
Oh, hi, I'm Peyton. I'm going to recite The Little Elfman, and I'm sure many of you have heard this one. Even reading it, I hear his voice in my head, and hearing a lot of these other poems. But I met a little elfman in the woods, the weeest little elf. He was sitting upon a mushroom stall that was taller than himself. "How do you do, little man?" I said, "and what do you do all day?" "I dance and frolic about," said he. "I scuttle and I play. I surprise the butterflies with a katydid I see." "Katy didn't," I said. But he said, "Katy did with me." Then I swing on the cobweb, swing up in the air so high, and the crickets chirp and hear me sing Upsy Daisy Die.
Then I play with the baby chicks. I call them chick, chick, chick. What do you think of that? Said he. I said, it makes me sick. It gives me sharp and shooting pains to listen to such drool. So I picked up my foot and squashed the little darn fool.
Well done. Dad taught the little elf man to all of us when we were little kids. I remember how surprised I was that the little elf man got squashed. I was even more surprised that my dad said, darn, which I knew was awfully close to damn. And we love this poem. It's whimsical and sweet, up until it isn't. David Optikar, would you come up?
Do you fear the force of the wind, the slash of the rain? Go face them and fight them. Be savage again. Go hungry and cold like the wolf. Go wade like the crane. The palms of your hands will thicken. The skin of your cheek will tan. You'll grow rugged and weary and swarthy, but you will walk like a man. Mike was kind enough to let me take just a moment to share just the thought I had. And much like Charlie, I could go on and on and on. Family. Eddie loves his family. He would speak of them sweetly, frequently, and always with a sense of just deep love and appreciation. He'd say to me, you know, Dave, I'm the luckiest guy around. I've got 4 great kids that love me. And he would tell me how they would talk once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 10 times a day. And I don't know many families that do that. And so it makes me think that something that they gave him was very special also. And so I am touched by that, because as a young, or an older dad with a 12-year-old, you know, it's given me a sense of how that works. And he left that imprint on me. And the other thing that always struck me so vividly is that whenever we would talk, whenever I'd call him or he'd call me, the first thing out of his mouth was, so Dave, how are you? How's your daughter doing? How's your wife? How are you guys getting along? Not about what he wanted to say, but how are you? And I just think that's just such a unique, rare quality. And I know today that he's here with us. I believe that wholeheartedly. Thank you.
You'll grow rugged and weary and swarthy, but you'll walk like a man. I hope as long as I recite this poem, I'll be able to hear Dad's voice in it. He loved to tell it. He perfected the rhythm and gravelly sound required to deliver it authentically. Dad's hands were thick. They were big and strong right to the end. Perhaps they got big and strong when he worked in the steel mill as a teenager, shoveling black coal into carts. As kids, we would play with him in the swimming pool. He would grab us with those big hands and spin around in the pool with us as our bodies skipped across the top of the water as he spun. He called them whirligigs. It wasn't until I had children of my own did I realize just how much strength that took, especially as we got bigger. He loved playing in the pool with us. I remember being on his back in the deep end of the pool and grabbing a hold of his neck, and we took a deep breath, and he plunged beneath the surface, and he would take us to the shallow end and back before coming back for air. And when we did surface, I'd ask him to do it again. Between the whirligigs and the underwater rides, going for a swim with your kids had to be pretty exhausting, though I never heard him say anything about it. He was rugged and swarthy and beautifully tanned. He was a man's man through and through. I do not think he feared the force of the wind or the slash of the rain. He'd been hungry and cold like the wolf and waited like a crane, facing his fears and defeating defeating his demons, set an example to his children. And many of you here tonight, in the final hours, the four of us held those hands as we prayed with him and sang his favorite songs. I like to think that when he let go of our hands, he was already in the hands of God. In the company of all he loved. That had gone on before him. Big Chris, will you come up?
Wow, what a room. You guys clean up pretty good, don't you? Mike, where's that IHOP at?
Right, yes.
Acceptance. And this is one of Eddie's favorite things to read. And Mike told me to read this and say a few words, so I will. Acceptance is the answer. This is hard.
Yes.
Today, there was a beautiful, beautiful ceremony with heartfelt language from everyone there. I felt yours and Jenny's and Tara's and everybody there. Joe's was just beautiful. Kara's, it was at the church, and there were a couple hundred people there, I guess. I don't know how many people were there, but it was just magnificent. And this is about acceptance, is the answer to all my problems today. When I am disturbed is because I find some person, place, or thing or situation, some fact of my life unacceptable to me. And I can find no serenity until I accept that person, place, thing, or situation as being exactly the way it is supposed to be at this moment. Nothing, absolutely nothing happens in God's world by mistake. Unless I accept life completely on life's terms, I cannot be happy. I need to concentrate not so much on what needs to be changed in the world as on what needs to be changed in me and my attitudes. You know, I tell you, Eddie was my sponsor. He would have been sober 40 years in November, I believe. I'm sober today, 36, God willing, by the grace of God, and a great fellowship of men and women. And you know, he taught me so much. We had lunch every Friday after our meeting. I remember many years ago, I took a picture of Eddie. We'd have lunch at Runway 84, beautiful little restaurant over here on 84. Great food, and Eddie liked to eat. We had a lot of fun there. I took a picture of Eddie and I, and they had these pictures of Runway 84 runways from all over the country. And one day I texted a picture to Mike before I really got to know Mike. And immediately got a text back on my phone, "Who are you and where is my father?" And we were laughing our heads off. You know, so well, we better call him right away because he's really thinking somebody kidnapped his dad or something. You know, looking at it looked like we were in an airplane. So, anyways, one of the things that we talked about, and Eddie was a Renaissance guy, and one of the things we used to talk about was "Welcome to Mountain Crossings." It's written by Henry David Thoreau. And it says, if one advances confidently in the direction of his dreams and endeavors to live the life he has imagined, he will meet with success unexpected in common hours. He will pass an invisible boundary. He passed it when he was going to go to Chicago on that bus, came to Jacksonville. He would turn on a dime, and then he went to Miami. It's amazing. New, universal, and more liberal laws will begin to establish themselves around and within him, and he will live life with the license of a higher order of beings. Eddie lived that life. When I was involved down at the Bar Association one day, he gave me a call. I said, "What are you doing, Chris?" I said, I just picked up this beautiful mango. We have a mango tree there. We did before it got blown down at the last storm. I said, "The most beautiful mango you'd ever see." And Eddie was a man of means. He could have had whatever he wanted. He said, "Oh yeah?" He came down to the Bar Association. I went home. He called me later and said, "Guess what I have?" I said, a mango. He said, yes, I got one on my very hand. I went to the Bar Association and found one on the ground. And while I was there, he got, I think, a journal and sent it to, I think, his daughter. And, you know, it was interesting. He was so amazed and so in tune with simple things. He didn't need great wealth. He didn't need all of that. He had a beautiful life. And from what I understand, he had a beautiful death. Yes, he would have been 95 tomorrow. Mike told me how beautiful it was to be surrounded by his family on his final prayers and songs and poetry and laughter and crying. Holding hands and reciting the St. Francis prayer, his favorite prayer, as he went out. Wow, what a beautiful ending to a beautiful life. I'm so moved by it. Thank you for letting me be a part of this, and what a beautiful family. Thank you all.
Thank you, Chris. Kevin Pfister.
There was a very cautious man who never romped or played. He never smoked, he never drank, and he never kissed a maid. And when he passed away, insurance was denied, for since he never lived, they claimed he never died.
Dad taught me this when I started my career as an insurance agent. As all of you know, Dad wasn't a very cautious man. He romped, he played, he smoked, he drank, and he kissed many a maid. He lived life to the fullest, to which no one can deny. I'll never forget the morning he called me back in 2016. After discussing the pleasantries of the day, he said to me, "Mike, I did something today you may not be too happy about." "Okay, Dad, what did you do?" "I jumped out of a plane this morning." "Huh?" He was 89. "Huh, Dad, I don't understand what you're trying to say." "Mike, I jumped out of a perfectly good working airplane this morning. I thought about asking you if I could do it first, but that thought you would probably say no, so I did it without saying it." "Wow, Dad, are you okay?" "Of course I'm okay. It was the thrill of a lifetime. I've always wanted to go skydiving. And what the heck? If the parachute didn't open, well, at least I would have had a long, wonderful life and a quick death at the end." He proceeded to tell me all the details. My old man went skydiving at age 89. He loved adventure, and he wasn't afraid to face his fears. He loved living. His two older sisters and his younger sister and two brothers had passed well before him, along with nearly all of his high school buddies. Mr. Hansel, we're so glad you're here today. Thank you for coming. Class of 1945, it really means a big deal that you're here. Thank you. No, I just wanted to say thank you for coming. Dad used to wonder why he lived so much longer than everyone else. He would usually answer his own question by saying, I guess I just love life so much. And somehow God knows I'm not ready to go yet. Jenny Pfister, you're up.
As we all know, Granddad lived a life of adventure and encouraged us all to live courageously and take risks. When I was a freshman at the University of Wisconsin, I was visiting Fort Lauderdale for my spring break, and we were sitting in his red convertible when he almost convinced me to leave college and travel the world on a cruise ship. He said it would be good for my education, at least the one that mattered. When you take risks and live a life of adventure, That sometimes means you don't always know exactly where you're going, but that is when God's positioning system kicks in. And I think that's what this prayer is about. This is Thoughts in Solitude by Thomas Merton. My Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end. Nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean I am actually doing so. But I believe the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. Therefore, I will trust you always, though I may seem to be lost and in the shadow of death. I will not fear, for you are ever with me, and you will never leave me to face my perils alone. Thank you.
Dad made sure our family went to Mass every Sunday morning. I'd be lying to you if I told you it was what I wanted to do, especially as I became a teenager. However, he always made Sunday mornings fun, too. After Mass, we would usually go out for a nice breakfast, followed by a visit to the Navy ships and submarines in Port Everglades, where Dad was usually able to get us a private tour because he was a Navy man himself. We'd go to the harness racetrack to watch the horses get exercised, go on picnics in the park or at the beach. It was often during these car rides he would teach us the many poems and inspirational verse he loved so much. Or we would play the soundtrack to The Sound of Music, 8-track, in his Lincoln Mark 7, and do a family sing-along to the whole musical. To this day, I can't turn the channel if The Sound of Music is on TV. The warmth of those happy family memories is just too good to pass up. Let's see. Marlene?
Hi, everyone. This was a piece that Eddie read or recited almost at least weekly in our morning meeting, and it's one of my favorites. Be careful of your thoughts, for your thoughts become your words. Be careful of your words, for your words become your deeds. Be careful of your deeds, for your deeds become your habits. Be careful of your habits, for your habits become your character. Be careful of your character, for your character becomes your destiny. You know, when I think of Eddie, he's like the father I never had. I met him like 10 years ago at my morning meeting, and when I'd pull into the meeting and I'd see his car, my heart always lifted, because I always loved to see him. You know, he never said an unkind word about anyone. I never heard him complain. He was always generous with his time and his wisdom. He had such a generous spirit. And he always had a glint in his eye. He always had a smile on his face. And he used to write little inscriptions in the meeting. You know, when I'd have challenges and I'd share about it, he would write me notes in the meeting and pass them to me. I've saved them all. One time he wrote me one on a styrofoam coffee cup. You know, he was just a real father figure to me. And when he used to compare me to Kara and Jenny, I thought that was just the kindest compliment he could give me, because I knew his children were amazing. I didn't even know you, but I knew, because he was extraordinary. I often tried to fix them up with my mother, to no avail. I even brought her to his assisted living facility with my aunt, and he entertained us. We went to happy hour. He actually got up and danced with one of the aides. It was one of my last visits with him, to watch him dance. Fancy, Eddie Glancy, fancy dancer. It was precious. And the day before he died, we were lucky. A few of us were able to go visit him, and Mike and Kara were there, and I got to hold those big hands and say goodbye to him. And he is with all of us. We will carry him in our hearts. I know I will. He's made such an impression on me, and so has his family, and I'm grateful to have known him. Thank you.
Jimmy Pfister, you are up.
A wise old owl lived in an oak. The more he heard, the less he spoke. The less he spoke, the more he heard. Why can't we be all like that bird?
Another favorite Dad repeated often, but not as often as this one. Maggie, you're up. Get close to that.
Hi, are we good? Closer. We good? Yes. Okay. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toes did gyre and gimble in the wave. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mummy raths outgrabe. Beware the Jabberwock, my daughter, the jaws that bite, the claws that catch. Beware the Jubjub bird, and shun the frumious bandersnatch. She took her vorpal sword in hand, long time the manson foe she sought. So rested she by the tum-tum tree, and stood awhile in thought. And as in uffish thought she stood, the Jabberwock with eyes of flame came whiffling through the tulgey wood, and burbled as it came. 1-2, and through, the vorpal blade went snicker-snack. She left it dead, and with its head, she went galumphing back. And hast thou slain the Jabberwock? Come to my arms, my beamish girl. O frog just stay, calloo calloy, Dad chortled in his joy. 'Twas brillig, and the slithy toes did gyre and gimble in the wabe. All mimsy were the borogoves, and the mummy raths outgrabe.
Many of you will recognize the Jabberwocky from the children's classic Alice in Wonderland. We learned the Jabberwocky from an early age. I don't think Dad realized this poem could be scary to a 5-year-old. For years, I wasn't quite sure if the boy had slain the Jabberwocky or the Jabberwocky had slain the boy. And I'm not sure why I didn't ask him. It's a great poem, and Dad had mastered the delivery just like Maggie mastered that one. About 10 years ago, he performed the Jabberwocky to perfection at the Glancy Family Talent Show in Ocean Isle Beach, North Carolina. Most of you know Dad spent the last 2 weeks of July with his family in Ocean Isle for the past 50 years. In 1972, his siblings Mary, Joan, Ann, Joe, and Jim decided they need to have a place where they could meet each year so their families wouldn't drift apart by all the distance separating them. With family in Ohio, Virginia, Pennsylvania, and Florida, they decided Ocean Isle was perfect. Because of their love of family, Kara, Jenny, and Joe and I were privileged to grow up getting to know our big, wonderful, amazing family. Our grandparents have 24 grandchildren, each one of them a bright star in the universe. Spending time with them each summer is one of the great gifts we've ever received. The oldest of our cousins is 72. The youngest is 50. Combined, our grandparents have 68 great-grandchildren and 49 great-great-grandchildren, with hopefully many more to come. Together with all their spouses and significant others, our Glancy family reunion can get quite large. Seeing many of them only 1 week a year, it's hard to remember everyone's name, and yet somehow our dad remembered everyone. He loved being an uncle, and his nieces and nephews clearly loved him. He kept in touch with just about everyone. Sometimes we would have well over 100 members of the extended Glancy clan in Ocean Isle. Every year, a party would be held at someone's house and we would all crowd in together. Often that party would include the best talent show on earth. Think of it, we're all Irish. We can play instruments, we can sing, we can dance, we can tell stories, and we can drink. These talent shows are legendary. There have been hundreds of skits in the first 50 years. My personal favorite was probably in 1977, when Kara, Jenny, Joe, and I sang Honey Bun from the musical South Pacific. Either Kara or Jenny thought it would be cute to dress up 8-year-old Joe in a straw hula skirt and a coconut bra for his dance routine, as we sang 101 Pounds of Fun. That's our little honey bun. It was epic. I'm sure he's thrilled I'm sharing this with you today. Family vacations in Ocean Isle are not cheap, especially because we spend 2 weeks renting really nice beach houses, large enough to accommodate our immediate family. There's 26 of us. Dad took care of the bills for close to 30 years. As Joe and I got older and our business became more established, we would ask Dad if he wanted to transfer the financial burden of Ocean Isle to Joe and I. His response was classic Dad. He said the greatest investment he ever made was the money he spent bringing his family together every year. Joe and I eventually took over about 20 years ago, and we feel the exact same way. It's not cheap, but bringing our great family together is the best thing we can invest in. Our great big Glancy family reunion in Ocean Isle began in 1972. As far as I know, Dad and I hold the record for never missing a single year. That's 50 straight years. Thank you. This year I will take over the lead with my 51st, God willing, though I am certain His Spirit will be with us. I could spend the next several hours telling great family stories from Ocean Isle, but there's so much more to cover.